Hi y'all, welcome to Knittin Crazy, and today we're going to dive into the subject of what is essential versus extra with knitting and crocheting supplies. Hi again, I'm Paige, and if you've come across my channel and you like yarn, fiber arts, and the peaceful joy of knitting and crocheting, then you've come to the right place. I'm based here in sweet Georgia, and I not only share what's on my hook or needles, but I do share a little glimpse of my everyday life. If you're into cozy projects, colorful yarn, and calm creative space, then you've come to the right place. Now, I know this isn't the first video of its kind out there on YouTube, and these kind of videos are mainly subjective anyways, so I wanted to share my take on what is essential versus extra with my crocheting and knitting journey. The one thing I will add to my video along the way is some budgeting tips or any kind of alternatives to the type of supplies that I am using. So in case you are on a budget or you are not ready to invest in certain things, you have other options to go with. Knitting and crocheting should not be exclusive to just those that are elite or have the most money. It should be available to everyone of all walks of life. Majority of the supplies are affordable and you can purchase them on Amazon. And then there are some other supplies that are exclusive to certain shops and websites and can be a bit pricey. So I will link all the supplies that I can in the description below. Some supplies are not available, unfortunately, based off the merchant or the shop owner, but I will still recommend their business in case they have some other items that you're interested in. Okay, so to get started with the essentials list, because I do think that this list is way more important than the extras list when you're getting started on your knitting and crocheting journey. The first item on the essentials list is a no-brainer, but a good pair of scissors. I got these scissors from Hobby Lobby about 2 years ago, and I believe they were under about $10. I think this is a common item they have in their store, so if you have a Hobby Lobby near you, then maybe you'd like to go check this pair of scissors out. However, you do not have to have this specific pair of scissors in order to do your knitting and crocheting journey. You can use any old kind of scissors you have around the house, as long as it can cut through the yarn, of course. The second item on the list is a tape measure. This is a must-have so that you can measure your gauge or your swatch or the length of the body of your sweater or any parts of your garment that you want to make sure is meeting gauge or just meeting the size measurements that you're needing, especially for wearables. Anytime that you are knitting a sweater or anything that you're putting on your body other than like a shawl or a scarf, then a tape measure is very essential to making sure that you're meeting the measurements for your body size, since patterns that are out there aren't always fit to every single person's body type. You have to kind of make adjustments here and there as you learn. I am still kind of learning how to make adjustments to my wearables, and having a tape measure is a necessity. I have to have this with me everywhere my project goes. If I forget it, then I can't do my project, because what if I knit too far and I needed to stop way back? Or what if I stopped too early and I needed to keep going? This is what helps prevent me from making those kind of mistakes. Another item on the list that I believe is essential to just have laying around in your notions bag or in your crafting room, just in case, is a knitting needle gauge or ruler. This particular one is unfortunately not for sale. It is exclusive with a mystery yarn box that I received last fall that I purchased from Stephen West Knits, and this was his MCAL 2024 knitting gauge ruler, but it is the same concept of any other kind of ruler you can purchase at Hobby Lobby, Amazon, Michael's, any kind of shop that has any crafting supplies. But it has a stitch counter ruler, so you can count your stitches on your gauge swatch, and it has a knitting needle measuring hole section so you can see what size your needles are in case you have a pair of needles where the millimeters or the US size has rubbed off and you aren't sure what size they are. This is really good and helpful for that. Next item on the list is a pair of knitting needle stoppers. These are pretty basic stoppers that are rubbery or made of silicone. I purchased these on Etsy, so I don't know if they're still selling these or not. I will try to find the link and put it in the description. If I can't find this particular pair, then I will provide some other alternatives just so that you have options. You do not get just two, you get a pair of like 6 or 8, so it is quite a many of them. And these are very useful for putting on the ends of your needles when you're working on a project and you don't want to lose your stitches in case you have to put your project away, or maybe you have animals or small children that might mess with your stuff and you don't want to lose those stitches. So you simply just take your needles with the project on it and you pop the stopper on the end. It does not require a lot of force to get it on there, but you just put it on both ends of your knitting needles and then all your stitches are safe. The next item on the list that I have found useful for my knitting journey, but is not exactly a requirement since there is a more budget-friendly alternative to this, but it would be Barber Cord. Barber cord is a silicone or rubbery type tube material. I do not know what its real use for is outside of knitting and crocheting because this material is not geared towards crafting. It's just been utilized for it. But I bought this little can from this shop online. I did look up the shop on Etsy to see if they were still selling, and it looks like they're currently on break. I will still link their shop in case you ever want to save their shop for whenever they reopen, or if you want to come back to this video and find the information again. But they were selling a lot of colors of this Barber cord at the time, and it includes 3 cords between 24 to 32 inches in length. But you can always purchase this coil of Barber cord on Amazon, and it comes in a lot of colors as well. You could purchase this for basically $7, but if you are looking for something more budget friendly, I do have this option and then one more that I'll explain. I really don't expect to run out of this in a long time because here's the other good thing about this stuff. You don't just use it one time and then you throw it away. You can reuse this over and over and over until it disintegrates or it just doesn't meet your needs anymore. It is reusable for sure. So I don't think I'm going to ever find myself buying another one of these for a long time, if not ever. Now here is the second alternative to using this cord at all, is you can just use a scrap piece of yarn. Just thread your yarn in a darning needle and just simply weave the scrap yarn through each stitch until you get to the last stitch, and then just tie the scrap yarn together until you're ready to pick up that project again or return the needles to the project. Okay, the next item on the list that I have found is a necessity for traveling purposes is this cute little pill box. Yes, this is an actual pill organizing box that I got from Amazon for like $7. It has these 2 magnetic wings where you can open up the inside and see all these different pockets that technically would hold your pills. But I have this as my little stitch marker box, and I have a cute little mini pair of snippet scissors, a darning needle, and some other extras that came from a knitting needle book that I'll show later, and then a threader for putting your yarn through the darning needle, which is so useful. That is another recommended essentials, and it's so inexpensive. You can technically purchase it from the sewing section since it's mainly used for sewing needles, and it has a very wide opening at the end to help get your yarn through. It has been a lifesaver for any kind of tails that I'm weaving in, or a million tails that I'm weaving in. But again, this is a magnetic pill organizer box. The next item on the list that is a pretty big necessity for any crocheting journey is a good pair of crochet hooks, or just a crochet hook, whatever your preference is. You don't have to have a set like this. You can just have 1 hook or 2, whatever fits your project needs. I prefer these hooks, which are the Dots hooks by KnitPicks. These are very, very popular hooks, and they've been highly recommended by big YouTubers and big crocheting artists, and they are still for sale on the KnitPicks website, but they are very, very popular. This comes in a set of 10, which I'm missing 1 right now because it's in a project currently. These are really nice hooks with a brushed metal finishing so it doesn't snag at your projects. Very, very smooth. It has like a silicone rubbery touch thumb grip. And then the dots in the back end are plastic. And it has the size in millimeters etched on the end. These are highly recommended. I will put the link in the description. These are not that expensive from what I remembered. I don't really want to say a price and be wrong about it, but I don't remember spending max $20 maybe. They're pretty standard sizes. They're not anything special or anything. All right, the next item on my list that is an essential is a Notion bag. This can look different for everybody. It can be big, they can be small, they can have compartments, they can have no compartments. You can even use a plastic Ziploc bag if you really need to. However, for my case, I have a Notions bag that was made for me upon request by my neighbor who sews and does quilting. And I bought this sewing pattern that I will put the pattern link in the description. Any of you out there that like to sew might be interested in, is the spring roll pouch. I cannot remember the designer's name for the pattern. I'll put it on the screen. This bag looks a bit deceiving. It looks like it's really small. Like, how in the world are you gonna be able to fit a lot of stuff in there? But when you open it up, it opens into a much bigger compartment bag. And this has been such an awesome bag, and my neighbor did such an excellent job sewing it. It is so sturdy and so well made. And she let me pick out all the fabric pieces and the colors, and she just put it together for me. We did a little craft trade where I finished 2 unfinished projects for her that were knitting and crocheting projects, and then she made this bag for me in return. So again, super happy with this. I do recommend the pattern to anybody who wants to sew, but it comes with a nice zipper compartment here and a zipper compartment here, and then 2 elastic pouches for larger items. And then of course 2 big massive openings in the sides. It's got a cute little handle. This could also be a good bag for makeup even. It doesn't even have to be for knitting and crocheting supplies. You can put all kinds of stuff in here. But for me, this really fit my needs with my knitting and crocheting supplies. So I'm down to the last 3 items on the list before we move on to the extras list. The next item on the list is a ball winder. This is a fairly inexpensive item you can purchase on Amazon. This is the cheapest of the cheap ball winder. You don't need anything super fancy or aesthetic to wind yarn. You're just putting the yarn on here, winding it, and being done. This one is pretty simple construction of just metal and plastic, and it just simply turns like this to wind your yarn into these really nice cakes where you can pull the yarn string from the middle instead of the outside. This has been a very useful item for me to have since I wind all of my yarn into cakes right before I start a project. I don't particularly like using yarn from the outside because that causes the ball to roll around the floor, whereas the cakes that you make on this simply pull from the middle, and you never have to constantly worry about pulling some slack from the yarn. This is probably about 20 bucks, I would say, on Amazon. The next item on my list is a yarn swift. Now, this is a bit debatable to some who might be watching this, and you are a knitter or crocheter, and you might say, that's not quite a necessity. For me, this is most certainly a need, since I have tried to wind hanks of yarn with just a chair or my legs as other alternatives that they recommend online, and it was just time consuming, and it was hurting my back, or it was hurting my legs, or it was just not making the process enjoyable for me. However, I'm here to recommend a fairly affordable yarn swift that's not $150 like some yarn swifts online. This is a cheap $15 plastic yarn swift. I will put a picture of it on the screen where it's fully opened, since I don't want to open it on the screen right now. This is a pretty decent travel size, honestly. It's not that big. It fits in this tiny little box. It honestly gets the job done, of course. There are some more higher quality yarn swifts out there. There's one in particular that I was thinking of buying before I got this one because it looked really cool. It was $150. No ma'am, we're good. I don't need that. This will be the last essentials item that I recommend. And again, this is a bit debatable, like the yarn swift. I have tried other alternatives to this, which I'll share in a minute, but this has been the best investment I have made for my knitting and crocheting journey, and I do recommend it to others. And the item is foam blocking mats. I got these on Amazon, and it comes with 9 squares, and it also comes with pins to hold down your garments or your projects. Most people will recommend you use just a folded towel. If you have any pins laying around from sewing and things to do your projects, that's perfectly fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I have done that myself, and I just learned that this was a way better investment. There are some other options similar to this out there. I have heard people buy these same kind of mats at the hardware store, and they have these mats advertised towards children's rooms from what I heard. So you can always try that option if it's cheaper. So I do recommend that as an essential. But again, that is my opinion on what works for me in my knitting and crocheting journey. Okay, so that wraps up the essentials list for knitting and crocheting supplies. We will now move on to the extras, which I don't have that many, so this should be pretty quick. Most of my supplies have been pretty essential for me. And then later in my experience and my journey, I invested in some more expensive things that again are extras. The next item on the list is most certainly an extra. This is a accessory that helps you make your projects mobile. So if you want to go out for a walk, or if you're walking around events, or even in the car, this kind of helps keep your yarn from getting tangled up and staying with you. But it is called a yarn minder, I believe, but it twists so that way as you're pulling your working yarn, it will constantly keep your yarn ball moving, and you can put it on your arm like this as you're walking, left or right-handed, and you just put the ball of yarn through the center here and then have your working yarn on the outside. You can also purchase this clip version, so in case you're not putting it on your wrist, but maybe you're putting it on like a purse holder clip or just on a hook or something on your desk or things like that, you can clip this there and it will still spin just the same. Called lemon wood that you can purchase these from. So if you are interested in investing in something like that, that would help you make your projects more mobile and help you get a little more active while still doing what you love, that is a good option to have. I have just 3 items remaining on the extras list that I currently have in my possession. The first item is definitely a investment. If you are somebody who purchases a lot of needles because you have to have different sizes for different projects, then it might be time to invest in a good knitting needle book. This is an interchangeable knitting needle book, and this particular one is not the only one out there. This was a personal preference of mine to purchase this, but it's still the same concept for some of the cheaper versions that might be out there. This was a $150 knitting needle book that I purchased about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's from the yarn dyeing company Sewrella Yarn. She also has Tunisian crochet and crochet books as well, but this is a very aesthetically pleasing knitting needle book. So if you're into aesthetics, then this is definitely a good choice. But it comes with all these main size knitting needles and some cords, which some of these cords are gray and some of them are clear. The clear ones are the ones that come with the book. The gray ones I purchased separately from the same company because they twist and turn better than the plastic ones. And then you get these little twisted end stoppers. So if you need to change out your knitting needles with a different size, or you need that pair for a different project, then these stoppers hold your project on the cable. That is the Sewrella Yarn knitting needle book, and I will still link her website. She also does hand-dyed yarns. That is her main product that she sells. So I do recommend her yarn if you aren't really looking to invest in something like this. The next item is the same as the knitting needle book, but it's a Tunisian crochet hook book, and it's the Chaogu brand Tunisian crochet book. This I got off Amazon. It comes with some twist cables in here. These are some of the hooks. One of them is missing currently because it's in a project, but these are bamboo material type hooks, and they have a bit of a sharper tip and hook side, and then of course the connection twisted end. I would say Tunisian crochet is a mix of knitting and crocheting together, but this is something you can purchase on Amazon. Again, this is an investment. You do not need this book in order to do Tunisian crochet. There are other hooks out there that are cheaper, but if you do plan on investing in a set, I highly recommend this brand, which is Chaogu. They also make knitting needles, which I'll show in a minute, which are my favorite. The final item on the extras list, and for all the lists together, is this organizing book I got for all my individual Chaogu needles. I started noticing as I was purchasing needles that I wasn't really able to give them a home. They were just strode all over my office and it was driving me nuts. And thank God they had the sizes etched on the needles so that way I always knew what they were. But I hated scrambling around my office looking for the right size needle for things instead of having one central place for them. This was a customized book. This person is still sewing these types of supplies, but she changes up the fabrics and she only opens her shop at certain times when she's got a stock available. This book I purchased as soon as she opened up her shop on Etsy, and it's a canvas fabric book with magnetic buttons to hold everything in, and it has these plastic envelopes to carry all of your needles in, and I have them all labeled by size, millimeter size and US size, so that way I can quickly find which one I need without having to check every single needle to see which one is the right size I need. But it does have a lot of these envelopes, so that way you can store a lot of different size needles. You can even use a simple skull binder with zipper page inserts if you want. I've seen people do that, and that is not a bad idea actually. But again, I'll put her shop in the description and she might have something cool for you to buy. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this video with the essentials versus extras supply list. And if I had to pick one thing out of all this that is my absolute favorite to share with you all, it would definitely have to be my dots crochet hooks. These things have gotten me through some big projects, some very heavy weighted projects. Like for example, I made my mom a hexagon sunburst blanket and it was worsted weight wool yarn. Let me tell you, that thing was heavy. These things definitely got me through the job, and they do not look like they've even budged in damage, wear and tear, nothing. This is my favorite. I highly recommend these. I would love to hear what your favorite crocheting and knitting supplies are if you would like to comment below. And a reminder to subscribe and hit the like button and hit the notifications button so that way you don't miss any of my video uploads. Thank you for joining me on this journey with my crocheting and knitting supplies, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.